The man continued walking through the forest when suddenly he seemed to catch sight of something. The man ran quickly and hid behind a tree, not daring to make a sound. A horde of zombies passed by just a couple of meters ahead of the man. Just as Rick was surveying his surroundings, he noticed another person coming up behind him. This person was no other than Morgan, who had acted separately from Carol. Rick felt a sense of unease, as he sensed that Morgan's state of mind was off. Rick called out Morgan's name and said, "It's me! You know me!" Upon hearing Rick's voice, Morgan gradually eased up.
I'm not right.
It turned out that Morgan wasn't unfamiliar with Rick. He had mistaken him for a hallucination. Rick was relieved to see Morgan speak up. It would have been a real shame to be killed by his best friend. This time, the two of them have a rare tacit understanding. Their thoughts were simple. They couldn't allow those people to return to the Saviors and betray them, as it would lead to many deaths.
You're out here for them. Me too. We finish it. You and me.
They moved through the forest and reached the small town that Alden had mentioned. There was a broken arm and leg on the road, proof that one of the group of captives had been bitten. It was likely that the captives were hiding nearby. Just as Rick was about to speak, everything went black before him. When Rick woke up again, he saw none other than the captives, and the man lying on the ground with his arms and legs cut off. They hadn't noticed the waking Rick and Morgan and were just discussing whether or not to leave the wounded behind. Some believed that these few were a burden, preventing them from returning to the Saviors. Others questioned the point of going back, as they had been abandoned long ago. However, Jared wanted to take Rick back, considering it a major achievement. He believed that Negan would reward them handsomely for it. Jared grabbed the stool next to him and was ready to give them a last ride. Rick spoke up and stopped Jared, stating that their vehicle was nearby, and they could take them to the hilltop for treatment. He also mentioned that those who wanted to stay at the hilltop were welcome to join them. He emphasized that they had made a wrong choice, but it was not too late to change. If they released them and cooperated, they would be given a chance to become part of the hilltop community. They could live together and be a part of their group. Furthermore, Rick urged them to make a quick decision as a horde of zombies was approaching. The majority of the people present were swayed by his words. They still remember what Simon said when he abandoned them, but Jared doesn't believe a word of it, nor does he believe in a zombie horde, and urges the others not to be fooled by Rick's promises. When Jared sees that his mate is still hesitating, he aims his gun at Morgan, but the others stop him. Killing Rick and Morgan would make joining the hilltop impossible. At that moment, zombies indeed began to approach from outside. Their numbers overwhelming, chaos ensued. As the group was unprepared for such an onslaught, the guy with the broken arm and leg was the first to be eaten. Rick urgently shouted to untie them and return their weapons. He and Morgan could help them escape. However, Jared threatened them with his gun, insisting that no one should untie them. Jared is ready to kill Rick and Morgan first. Luckily, an injured man bumps off Jared, but the man becomes zombie food. The other man quickly untied Rick and Morgan. If he had been any slower, they would have been dead too. Morgan reclaimed his staff, while Rick retrieved a rifle and began to eliminate the approaching zombies. These guys have decided to follow Rick back to the hilltop and join them for good. However, Rick and Morgan exchanged a glance, resolute in adhering to their prior agreement. Killing these people, their expressions didn't fluctuate the slightest bit. Morgan looked at the other side of the house and saw that Jared, the man he wanted to kill the most, had escaped. So he followed him. When Morgan got to the corner, there was only one room. This is where Jared disappeared. Morgan took the stick and carefully probed inside. Jared must be hiding somewhere. However, at that moment, Morgan was once again plagued by a hallucination, seeing the image of the boy Henry. While he was lost in thought, Jared attacked Morgan from behind and picked up his stick, ready to stab him through. But Morgan grabbed the stick. Morgan swiftly managed to kick Jared out of the room. Jared looks up and sees the zombies are behind him. He tries to run back into the house again and Morgan slams the door shut. Realizing that waiting there meant certain death, Jared attempted to leave. However, Morgan firmly grabbed hold of him, refusing to let him go. In the end, Jared was eaten alive by the zombies. Half an hour later, after Rick had eliminated all the zombies and threats, they both understood that showing mercy to enemies was often cruelty to oneself. Meanwhile, within the clean and orderly confines of Jodi's room at the garbage dump, she had changed into clean clothing, appearing much more presentable. However, the memory of the scavengers being massacred weighed heavily on her. After a while, Jodi's began to gather her belongings, some clothes and 2 handguns, a clear sign that she was planning to leave. With everything packed, Jadis picked up a baseball bat, wiping away a tear from her eye. Then she opens another container and Negan is trapped inside.
No, really, just tell me, what the shit?
A few minutes later, Jadis was sitting on her suitcase, glancing at her watch from time to time, as if waiting for something. Jadis had set up a pyre here and Negan was bound on the ground. Although he was immobilized, he couldn't stop talking, repeatedly explaining that people were resources, and that he would never have ordered the massacre. He blamed Simon for taking matters into his own hands. Negan's words weren't an attempt at submission, but rather a genuine regret for the events. He even pleaded for Jadis to forgive his mistakes. Growing annoyed by Negan's words, Jadis swung the baseball bat down, but she stopped just short of striking him. Negan was visibly taken aback by the sudden turn of events, but Jadis doesn't seem to want to let Negan die so easily, and instead throws the baseball bat into the firewood and turns to leave. Negan sees that no one is here to watch him, so he tries to break the ropes, but it doesn't seem to work. Negan can only control the movement of the flatbed truck. After a while, Jadis returned pushing a zombie in front of her. Negan, that guy, opened Jadis' suitcase and took out a handgun and a flare. Negan doesn't want to hurt Jadis because she's already pathetic. Inside the suitcase, Negan found some photographs, likely Jadis' most precious possessions. Negan tried to reason with Jadis, urging her to come out and talk, threatening to burn the photographs if she didn't. Reluctantly, Jadis emerged, pleading with Negan not to destroy the photos. Negan could feel Jadis' pain because he was the same person. Negan then talked about his past. It turns out that Negan had a hard time holding onto his life when the apocalypse hit. It was his wife, Lucille, who had constantly encouraged and supported him through the toughest times. Then his wife died and he relied on this baseball bat to get him to where he is today and named it Lucille in honor of his wife. That's why Negan cares so much about the bat. It was as if his wife was beside him. So Negan understands how important photos are to Jadis. Suddenly, the sound of a helicopter echoed through the sky. Jadis grew tense, and without hesitation, she pushed the zombie toward Negan. Jadis counted the shots Negan fired from the gun. When the gun ran out of bullets, she lunged at Negan and tried to take the flare out of his hand. As the flame extinguished, meanwhile, the helicopter was already over them. Jadis hurriedly ran back to her room to retrieve another flare. Negan was shocked that there were still helicopters after all this time in the post-apocalyptic world. It seems that Jadis is connected to them in some way. The helicopter hovered for a moment before retracing its path and leaving. Jadis returned with another flare, but it was too late. The helicopter was already gone. Jadis collapsed to her knees in despair. It was revealed that the scavengers had maintained contact with these mysterious people. Jadis was going to leave with them today, and then that bastard Negan ruined it. Jadis contemplated burning the baseball bat, wanting Negan to experience the feeling of loss. Negan nervously kept pleading with Jadis and he stated that he didn't burn Jadis' photos. Despite his threats, he claimed he wouldn't actually go through with it. "I know what this means to you," he admitted. At that moment, Negan's demeanor was far from that of the tyrant of the region. He appeared as an injured man. Jadis softened, letting go of the flare in her hand, and then she bent down, crying in anguish. Finally, Jadis released Negan. At the end of the day, they are all poor people in this post-apocalyptic world, living on a little bit of hope. Negan had intended to inquire about the helicopter, but seeing that Jadis had no intention of revealing anything, he refrained from pressing further. Subsequently, Negan left the place, promising to visit her often. He extended an invitation for Jadis to join him with the Saviors if she ever wanted. At night, Negan found a car. Throughout the journey, his brows were furrowed, lost in thought. Suddenly, his expression shifted to one of surprise as he spotted someone by the roadside. You can guess who Negan met.
If shit could shit, it still wouldn't look as shitty as you.
Negan drove back to the Savior's base. When he saw someone coming, the duty officer came up to check on him.
But you're not gonna say a word, you understand?
I knew you were alive. Negan, I knew it.
Hell yes I am. Daddy's home and it's gonna be a surprise.
Meanwhile, Carol continued her search for Henry in the woods. She discovered Henry's arm guard and then heard his distant cries for help. Without hesitation, she sprinted in the direction of his voice. Henry was hiding behind a tree trunk, with 3 zombies closing in on him. Carol arrived just in time, rushing to his aid. This scene may seem familiar, reminiscent of Carol's daughter, Sophia, hiding by the riverbank in the past. Finding Henry helped Carol to somewhat heal her past regrets and the cowardice she once felt. 2 hours later, the sight of Carol returning with Henry brought joy to those within the walls. Ezekiel also looked over in surprise. Henry was running towards him excitedly. The trip out had made Henry miss the king immensely. Afterward, the group rested on the grass, their attention fixated on the entrance. Relief washed over them as Rick and Morgan returned, covered in blood, particularly Morgan, who gazed at Henry in disbelief. Was this another illusion? Then Morgan pulled Henry's collar open and there was no blood on it. It wasn't an illusion, Henry was truly alive. Morgan said shakily that he killed them and avenged Henry's brother. As he spoke, Morgan choked up and couldn't speak for a moment. Rick walked towards the building to change his dirty clothes. A lot of people wondered what they were doing out there. Alden looked at the blood on their bodies and saw what was going on. Meanwhile, Morgan found a secluded spot to sit. His heart was heavy, burdened by a persistent sense of guilt. The death of his son had become his deepest wound, a source of immense pain. Morgan himself is also a lonely person, no relatives in the world, although there are friends, but no real understanding of his confidant. Against the backdrop of the night, Morgan's figure appeared hauntingly desolate. In another location, a pile of bullet casings was delivered to a certain alley. This was Eugene's bullet-making site. Daryl wanted to blow up the machine, but Rosita didn't think it was necessary. Just take out Eugene,